Hey, I'm Caleb, and my dumbass hasn't thought of a good fucking intro yet, but we're gonna work with this now. This is my first album review on here. We're gonna be talking about one of my favorite doom metal albums of all time, and one of the most underrated metal albums of all time, Disembowelment, Transcendence into the Peripheral. Now, this band is from Australia, and it's already one thing that's unique about them. And they put out some demos in the early 90s, which aren't really that good, but eventually they started to develop their own sound, and they were taking all these influences from death metal and death doom, specifically stuff like Autopsy and Winter and Sempiternal Death Rain and stuff like that, but they were slowing it down even further to like to give it like an ambient feel almost, and in a lot of ways it's a precursor to Funeral Doom, but it's not exactly Funeral Doom. We'll see why it's not in a little bit. But there's also like influences of grind, so there'll be sudden fast parts here and there, but just the riffs themselves and the tone of the guitar and whatnot. And there'll be some electronic ambient touches over it to just add to the atmosphere of the music. And this all culminated in an album in 1993, which is obviously fucking called Transcendence into the Peripheral. And it's one of the best metal albums ever made. Now, the best thing about this album, and despite how old it is and how many new bands have tried to outdo what they're doing here, be it in the Funeral Doom subgenre that they inspired or all the various forms of like experimental death metal or whatnot, this is still one of the darkest albums I've ever heard. Like, if I could call any album just the sonic equivalent of pure hatred, it's fucking this one. Like, and one of the things that helps that is that you're never really comfortable when you're listening to it. Like, despite how reverby and slow and down-tuned and like dun, there's a lot of dun riffs on here. There'll be like a fast part that comes out of nowhere, and you won't know when it happens, and instead of feeling random, it's jarring, but like in a good way. Like, so you never know when it's gonna happen next, and it keeps you, like, it kind of keeps you feeling tense. And just the tone of the music, it's not similar to bands like Skepticism or Funeral or Thurgathon or whatever, where, like, it's, like, kind of melodic, so, like, you can just kind of sit back and take it all in. Like, the tone of the music is really ugly and raw and dirty and everything in between, so it's not something that's, like, warm-sounding at all. This is added to by the vocals. This has some of the best growling I've ever heard. Like, he loves to, like, I don't know the name of the singer because I'm too lazy to do any fucking research on a band with just one album. But this guy loves to draw out his growling and also drown it in even more reverb than the rest of the band. I'll talk more about the reverb and why it's not a problem in a minute, because usually that's kind of a problem for me. And this just kind of makes you feel like he's in the middle of like some giant ass cave or some shit. But it's not like cavernous death metal or whatever. Like, you know the sound I'm talking about, incantation and whatnot. And it works perfectly. His growling actually doesn't even sound like a person. Like, he actually sounds like a demon or some shit. And every now and then he'll start screaming black metal type vocals, and he's really good at that too. And every now and then there'll be like some spoken word type stuff, because there's like a concept to this album about like transcendence or some gay Hoover type stuff. But back to the reverb thing, which also helps to the really atmospheric cave-like feel of the album. Normally the problem with bands that drown their sound in reverb is that they usually drown it in so much reverb that you can't even tell what notes the band is playing. And a lot of the times they just do it because they're not even playing all that much. It's usually just 00100 binary code bullshit. Basically glorified slowed to gent music. Like, there's nothing hiding behind the reverb. Here, the reverb doesn't try to hide the music, it just adds to it. The music is great on its own. You can actually hear what everyone's playing. And, like, what they're playing is all down-tuned to all hell, but it's still audible. And I guess to some people it might seem like they're just kind of riffing on one note over and over again. But that's actually not what's going on. It's just that they're playing the notes so slowly that they let the notes drag a lot. And the riffs don't really repeat any more times than your average Death or Cannibal Corpse album. They're just played slowly so it sticks on that riff longer. And one thing that also helps to this album is, like, how the song structures just... Obviously, I said they're unpredictable because one time they'll get loud and another time they'll get softer, but there's more to it than just fast, slow, fast, slow. Like, they'll play with all these different ambient textures and various different riffs that you often won't hear again after it's done repeating them. Like, these songs are mostly about 10, 12 minutes long. It doesn't follow, like, AAB form, like most music like this doesn't. And even if you don't like stuff like Funeral Doom, and one of the problems with it is how drawn out it is, this isn't really that drawn out. It's going too many places, and it's too varied, and the songs sound too different from each other to really be drawn out. And there's, speaking of songs like that, how they're different from each other, you have stuff like your Prophetic Throne of Ivory and Celestial Transcendence of All My Imagined Shores, which have like a almost peaceful feel to them. Like, it's like almost like a breather, but it's still heavy as shit. And then you have a Burial at Ornans, which is my favorite song on here, which is easily the darkest, heaviest thing on here, with like no relenting at all. And the opening track, which has a first riff that actually kind of sounds like the opening riff to Dehydrated by Pestilence. I already forgot the fucking name of the song for some reason, but it's the first song on the album. I don't know why I'm forgetting it. But it only sounds like that for a little while, because after that, like, this really, like, slowly played acoustic guitar gets played over these really fast grindcore type drums, and it's a really weird sound, but it invokes something really weird in you that I really can't help but like. But yeah, this, even today, this is one of the darkest, heaviest, slowest, and most intimidating albums in metal music. And despite how much influence it's had on everybody, even though it's not very well known, there's really nothing else that really sounds like it. And that's why it's one of the true classics of the genre. Like, there's a guy on Metal Archives who says this is one of the top 10 best metal albums of all time, and I wouldn't quite go that far, but I'd probably put it in my top 100. So, yeah, this is easily a perfect fucking 10. If you're into death metal or doom metal, even remotely, you've got to fucking hear this. I'm almost certain that this is going to be one of your all-time favorite albums as soon as you hear it. So, yeah, I can't think of an outro, so get the fuck out of here!